This is the Mueller Report audio, presented by Government Unfiltered. I'm Dan Williams. This version of the Mueller Report contains updates released by the Department of Justice in June and November 2020, following lawsuits by BuzzFeed News and the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Due to these new releases and through the support of your donations, I'm re-releasing the Mueller Report audio to replace the previous versions and compiling the subsections into their larger sections. The previous episodes will be archived and available at MuellerReportAudio.com. To keep these episodes commercial-free and free for everyone to access, this podcast operates on the value-for-value model. I produce the audio, and you decide what it's worth. You can donate at MuellerReportAudio.com, or, as I continue to read public documents and make them available here in audio format, you can support with a recurring monthly donation at patreon.com/TimberlaneMedia. Section 2. Russian Active Measures Social Media Campaign. The first form of Russian election influence came principally from the Internet Research Agency LLC, IRA, a Russian organization funded by Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin and companies he controlled, including Concord Management and Consulting LLC and Concord Catering, collectively Concord. The IRA conducted social media operations targeted at large U.S. audiences with the goal of sowing discord in the U.S. political system. These operations constituted active measures, a term that typically refers to operations conducted by Russian security services aimed at influencing the course of international affairs. The IRA and its employees began operations targeting the United States as early as 2014. Using fictitious U.S. personas, IRA employees operated social media accounts and group pages designed to attract U.S. audiences. These groups and accounts, which addressed divisive U.S. political and social issues, falsely claimed to be controlled by U.S. activists. Over time, these social media accounts became a means to reach large U.S. audiences. IRA employees traveled to the United States in mid-2014 on an intelligence-gathering mission to obtain information and photographs for use in their social media posts. IRA employees posted derogatory information about a number of candidates in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. By early to mid-2016, IRA operations included supporting the Trump campaign and disparaging candidate Hillary Clinton. The IRA made various expenditures to carry out those activities, including buying political advertisements on social media in the names of U.S. persons and entities. Some IRA employees, posing as U.S. persons and without revealing their Russian association, communicated electronically with individuals associated with the Trump campaign and with other political activists to seek to coordinate political activities, including the staging of political rallies. The investigation did not identify evidence that any U.S. persons knowingly or intentionally coordinated with the IRA's interference operation. By the end of the 2016 U.S. election, the IRA had the ability to reach millions of U.S. persons through their social media accounts. Multiple IRA-controlled Facebook groups and Instagram accounts had hundreds of thousands of U.S. participants. IRA-controlled Twitter accounts separately had tens of thousands of followers, including multiple U.S. political figures who retweeted IRA-created content. In November 2017, a Facebook representative testified that Facebook had identified 470 IRA-controlled Facebook accounts that collectively made 80,000 posts between January 2015 and August 2017. Facebook estimated the IRA reached as many as 126 million persons through its Facebook accounts. In January 2018, Twitter announced that it had identified 3,814 IRA-controlled Twitter accounts and notified approximately 1.4 million people Twitter believed may have been in contact with an IRA-controlled account. Section 2A. Structure of the Internet Research Agency. 4.5 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. The organization quickly grew. 5.5 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. The growth of the organization also led to a more detailed organizational structure. The IRA's 2013 organizational structure included 7 departments: finance, human resources, advertising, mass media analytics and monitoring, information technology, search engine optimization, and information. By 2014, management oversaw 18 departments: finance, human resources, design and graphics, infographics, analytics, mass media monitoring, social networks, information technology, search engine optimization, bloggers and commentators, mass media commentators, 2 special departments, 2 night shifts, forums, Live Journal, a social networking service, and a department focused on U.S. operations, known as the Translator Department. 2 individuals headed the IRA's management, its General Director, Mikhail Bystroff, and its Executive Director, Mikhail Burchik. IRA documents show Burchik made staffing and personnel decisions, approved plans for the IRA's physical and electronic infrastructure, and received reports from managers in the IRA's departments, including the department responsible for U.S. operations. Bystroff developed policy documents for the IRA, made administrative decisions, and signed tax forms and corporate documents. As early as the spring of 2014, the IRA began to hide its funding and activities. A second entity, Internet Research LLC, was incorporated in Russia on March 26, 2014, and the Internet Research Agency LLC as a legal entity was dissolved effective June 30, 2014. During February 2015, 2 new entities, Glavset LLC and MixInfo LLC, were incorporated, followed by another entity, Azimuth LLC, in July 2016. These corporate entities were used to pay employees, often through multiple other entities. The IRA's U.S. operations are part of a larger set of interlocking operations known as Project Lokta, the name of the St. Petersburg neighborhood where the IRA first started. Project Lokta operated a number of organizations designed to carry out information activity, in the words of one internal IRA document. In addition to U.S. operations, some Lokta organizations undertook a number of media projects that appeared to target all Russian audiences, with names including Federal News Agency, Nation News, and Economy Today. Section 2B. Funding and Oversight from Concord and Prigozhin. Until at least February 2018, Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin and 2 Concord companies funded the IRA. Prigozhin is a wealthy Russian businessman who served as the head of Concord. Prigozhin has significant contacts to the Russian military and Russian Ministry of Defense. For example, after Prigozhin was sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department in December 2016, about 5 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. Numerous media sources have reported on Prigozhin's ties to Putin, and the 2 have appeared together in public photographs. The next 6 paragraphs, approximately 45 to 50 lines, redacted citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. IRA employees were aware that Prigozhin was involved in the IRA's U.S. operations. 4 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. In May 2016, IRA employees, claiming to be U.S. social activists and administrators of Facebook groups, recruited U.S. persons to hold signs, including one in front of the White House, that read, "Happy 55th birthday, dear boss," as an homage to Prigozhin, whose 55th birthday was on June 1, 2016. Similarly, in December 2016, IRA employees, again without revealing their true identities, convinced a U.S. activist from Charlotte, North Carolina, to pose with a sign that read, "Happy New Year, Brother Eugene." A third of the page redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. Section 2C. The IRA Targets U.S. Elections. 1. The IRA ramps up U.S. operations as early as 2014. The IRA's U.S. operations sought to influence public opinion through online media and forums. By the spring of 2014, the IRA began to consolidate U.S. operations within a single general department, known internally as the Translator Department. About 1.5 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. IRA subdivided the Translator Department into different responsibilities, ranging from operations on different social media platforms to analytics to graphics and IT. In 2014, employees within IRA's management began to create and share internal IRA documents, described as a manual, outlining the goals and strategies of its U.S. operations. The document, titled Waging Information Warfare Against the United States, presented the IRA's operations as a counterbalance against U.S. foreign policy and as information war, by targeting U.S. and other foreign audiences through online media. In another internal document, U.S. operations were described as targeting the U.S. audience with demotivator content that would undermine confidence in the U.S. government and political system. A graphic identified as an internal IRA chart outlining structure, translated from Russian, is redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. The manual and organizational charts show a structure that divided the operations into different groups. One version of the IRA manual included a diagram of the IRA's structure. In general, these documents show a management team, a subordinate group of analysts and administrators, departments focused on different media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc., and supporting graphics and IT departments. An additional group of IRA employees targeted U.S. audiences through Instagram accounts. Another document, dated May 2014, entitled General Strategy in Accordance with Basic Subject Matter, included the following passage. General premise. The next U.S. elections are in 2016. Democrats, Hillary Clinton. Republicans, there is no obvious favorite candidate. Goals. To spread distrust towards the candidates and the political system in general. 1. Whom will the Hispanic vote support? 2. Lack of confidence in Clinton as the wife of Bill Clinton. Past scandals, play on personal life. 3. A fight to change the political system. 4. All the primaries are purchasable. The oligarchs rule everything.
IRA employees also traveled to the United States on intelligence gathering missions. In June 2014, 4 IRA employees applied to the U.S. Department of State to enter the United States while lying about the purpose of their trip and claiming to be 4 friends who had met at a party. Ultimately, 2 IRA employees, Anna Bogacheva and Alexandra Krylova, received visas and entered the United States on June 4, 2014.
Prior to traveling, Krylova and Bogacheva compiled itineraries and instructions for the trip, about 7 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. 2.
U.S. operations through IRA-controlled social media accounts. Dozens of IRA employees were responsible for operating accounts and personas on different U.S. social media platforms. The IRA referred to employees assigned to operate the social media accounts as specialists. Starting as early as 2014, the IRA's U.S. operations included social media specialists focusing on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. The IRA later added specialists who operated on Tumblr and Instagram accounts. Initially, the IRA created social media accounts that pretended to be personal accounts of U.S. persons. By early 2015, the IRA began to create larger social media groups or public social media pages that claimed, falsely, to be affiliated with U.S. political and grassroots organizations. In certain cases, the IRA created accounts that mimicked real U.S. organizations. For example, one IRA-controlled Twitter account, @TEN_GOP, purported to be connected to the Tennessee Republican Party. More commonly, the IRA created accounts in the names of fictitious U.S. organizations and grassroots groups, and used these accounts to pose as anti-immigration groups, Tea Party activists, Black Lives Matter protesters, and other U.S. social and political activists.
The IRA closely monitored the activity of its social media accounts. For example, a September 2014 Excel file contained extensive notes about the IRA employees assigned to Facebook and Twitter operations, the employee accounts, the number of posts made through the accounts, and the target for each account, the size of the audiences, and other metrics. IRA employees also used Facebook's audience tools to monitor the impact and viewership of their accounts, including total number of page likes, total people reached by individual posts, and engagement, comments, likes, sharing, and clicks on posts. Specialists monitored the viewership for each post on the IRA-controlled accounts and reported these metrics to management in weekly reports, such as the image below, which tracked the weekly engagement of one IRA-controlled Facebook page for a 1-week period in late 2015. These figures, in turn, were collected by IRA management and presented during meetings with Prigozhin at Concord's offices. A graphic identified as a screenshot of Facebook metrics pertaining to IRA is redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. By February 2016, internal IRA documents referred to support for the Trump campaign and opposition to candidate Clinton. For example, one document contained directions to IRA operators, informing them that the theme of the week was U.S. political life.
At the top, the document read, "Main idea. Use any opportunity to criticize Hillary Clinton and the rest, except Sanders and Trump. We support them." The document provided different talking points and considerations for the different social media accounts operated by the IRA, broken into the following categories: Black community, don't shoot; patriotic, Texas; LGBT, Muslims, and refugees. The focus on the U.S. presidential campaign continued throughout 2016. In a May 2016 internal IRA document reviewing the IRA-controlled Facebook group, Secured Borders, the author criticized the lower number of posts dedicated to criticizing Hillary Clinton, and reminded the Facebook specialist it is imperative to intensify criticizing Hillary Clinton. IRA employees also acknowledged that their work focused on influencing the U.S. presidential election. Approximately 8 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. 3. U.S. operations through Facebook. Many IRA operations use Facebook accounts created and operated by its specialists. A March 2015 IRA manual describes how the Facebook operations folded into the larger aims of the IRA's U.S. operations. The main goal of all types of our activities is destabilization of political life and provoking the social tensions with the U.S. society. This goal can be reached by the means of 1. Supporting the most radical part of Facebook users. 2. Supporting the political and social movements that are in opposition towards the ruling regime. 3. Popularization of negative opinions among common users. We can practice all types of activities mentioned above, both creating our own profiles and communities, and being active in already existing communities. About 4 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. IRA Facebook groups active during the 2016 campaign covered a range of political issues and included purported conservative groups with names such as Being Patriotic, Stop All Immigrants, Secured Borders, and Tea Party News, purported Black social justice groups, Black Matters, Blacktivist, and Don't Shoot Us, LGBTQ groups, LGBT United, and religious groups, United Muslims of America. Throughout 2016, IRA accounts published an increasing number of materials supporting the Trump campaign and opposing the Clinton campaign. For example, on May 31, 2016, the operational account, Matt Skyber, began to privately message dozens of pro-Trump Facebook groups, asking them to help plan a pro-Trump rally near Trump Tower. To reach larger U.S. audiences, the IRA purchased advertisements from Facebook that promoted the IRA groups on the news feeds of U.S. audience members. According to Facebook, the IRA purchased over 3,500 advertisements, and the expenditures totaled approximately $100,000. During the U.S. presidential campaign, many IRA-purchased advertisements explicitly supported or opposed a presidential candidate or promoted U.S. rallies organized by the IRA, discussed below. As early as March 2016, the IRA purchased advertisements that overtly opposed the Clinton campaign. For example, on March 18, 2016, the IRA purchased an advertisement depicting candidate Clinton and a caption that read in part, "If one day God lets this liar enter the White House as a president, that day would be a real national tragedy." Similarly, on April 6, 2016, the IRA purchased advertisements for its account Black Matters, calling for a flash mob of U.S. persons to take a photo with hashtag Hillary Clinton for Prison 2016 or hashtag No Hillary 2016. IRA purchased advertisements featuring Clinton were, with very few exceptions, negative. IRA purchased advertisements referencing candidate Trump largely supported his campaign. The first known IRA advertisement explicitly endorsing the Trump campaign was purchased on April 19, 2016. The IRA bought an advertisement for its Instagram account, Tea Party News, asking U.S. persons to help them make a patriotic team of young Trump supporters by uploading photos with the hashtag Kids for Trump. In subsequent months, the IRA purchased dozens of advertisements supporting the Trump campaign, predominantly through the Facebook groups Being Patriotic, Stop All Invaders, and Secured Borders. Collectively, the IRA's social media accounts reached tens of millions of U.S. persons. Individual IRA social media accounts attracted hundreds of thousands of followers. For example, at the time they were deactivated by Facebook in mid-2017, the IRA's United Muslims of America Facebook group had over 300,000 followers. The Don't Shoot Us Facebook group had over 250,000 followers. The Being Patriotic Facebook group had over 200,000 followers, and the Secured Borders Facebook group had over 130,000 followers. According to Facebook, in total, the IRA-controlled accounts made over 80,000 posts before their deactivation in August 2017. And these posts reached at least 29 million U.S. persons and may have reached an estimated 126 million people. 4. U.S. operations through Twitter. A number of IRA employees assigned to the translator department served as Twitter specialists. One IRA manual described the role of Twitter operations as the creation of political intensity through supporting radical groups, users dissatisfied with the social and economic situation, and oppositional social movements. The IRA's Twitter operations involved two strategies. First, IRA specialists operated certain Twitter accounts to create individual U.S. personas, which they used to publish different content and publish messages, communicate with real Twitter users in real time, and perform typical actions. Separately, the IRA operated a network of automated Twitter accounts, commonly referred to as a bot network, that enabled the IRA to amplify existing content on Twitter. A. Individualized Accounts. According to the IRA's manual, the goal when operating individualized accounts was to obtain sufficient reaction of real users of Twitter, and also, if it is possible, a reaction of mass media. In another internal IRA document, the IRA explained the goal of these accounts was interaction with target accounts, politicians, public figures, public opinion leaders in the USA. The IRA operated individualized Twitter accounts similar to the operation of its Facebook accounts, by continuously posting original content to the accounts while also communicating with U.S. Twitter users directly through public tweeting or Twitter's private messaging. The IRA used many of these accounts to attempt to influence U.S. audiences on the election. Individualized accounts used to influence the U.S. presidential election included @TEN_GOP, described above, @Jen_Abrams, claiming to be a Virginian Trump supporter with 70,000 followers, @Pamela_Moore13, claiming to be a Texan Trump supporter with 70,000 followers, and @America_First_, an anti-immigration persona with 24,000 followers. In May 2016, the IRA created the Twitter account @March_for_Trump, which promoted IRA-organized rallies in support of the Trump campaign, described below. Internal IRA documents show that the IRA monitored and analyzed the content posted to these accounts to ensure they appeared to be actual U.S. persons and properly tailored to the U.S. election. In one IRA document, entitled Content Analysis of Conservative Groups, an IRA employee reviewed an IRA-controlled Twitter account. The review criticized certain posts, writing, "Posts like this rather benefit Clinton than our agenda." The reviewer clarified, Clinton should be portrayed as a supporter of illegal Latinos from poor countries of South America, creeping across the U.S. border, gangsters from drug cartels of Latin America, American Muslim migrants. The emphasis should be made on the role of so-called undocumented Democrats in the elections. There are millions of them, and with their aid, Clinton hopes to replicate Obama's success by getting more votes. Using these accounts and others, the IRA provoked reactions from users and the media. Multiple IRA-posted tweets gained popularity. U.S. media outlets also quoted tweets from IRA-controlled accounts and attributed them to the reactions of real U.S. persons. Similarly, numerous high-profile U.S. persons, including former Ambassador Michael McFaul, Roger Stone, Sean Hannity, and Michael Flynn Jr., retweeted or responded to tweets posted to these IRA-controlled accounts. Multiple individuals affiliated with the Trump campaign also promoted IRA tweets, discussed below. B. IRA Botnet Activities. An IRA manual described the organization's bot network and the activities needed to maintain the network. There is a botnet of accounts to work in American Twitter, which is under joint control of all bloggers, Twitter specialists. Botnet accounts are divided by gender and race due to differences in the subjects they publish. Bloggers use special software for posting messages and adding followers to maintain bot network in proper condition. The bot network is monitored, and defects and malfunction of particular accounts are eliminated on a daily basis. There is a need to create and register new bot accounts because of periodic loss of some accounts due to bans from Twitter. To maintain the bot network in American part of Twitter, there is a need to specialize bot accounts to make them look more real. According to the IRA manual,
It was the responsibility of all Twitter specialists to participate in supporting and socializing a bot network, to control the accounts prepared for automatization, and to prepare messages to get a hashtag to the top and relevant topics. In January 2018, Twitter publicly identified 3,814 Twitter accounts associated with the IRA. According to Twitter, in the 10 weeks before the 2016 U.S. presidential election, these accounts posted approximately 175,993 tweets, approximately 8.4% of which were election-related. Twitter also announced that it had notified approximately 1.4 million people who Twitter believed may have been in contact with an IRA-controlled account. 5. U.S. operations involving political rallies. The IRA organized and promoted political rallies inside the United States while posing as U.S. grassroots activists. First, the IRA used one of its pre-existing social media personas, Facebook groups and Twitter accounts, for example, to announce and promote the event. The IRA then sent a large number of direct messages to followers of its social media account, asking them to attend the event. From those who responded with interest in attending, the IRA then sought a U.S. person to serve as the event's coordinator. In most cases, the IRA account operator would tell the U.S. person that they personally could not attend the event due to some pre-existing conflict or because they were somewhere else in the United States. The IRA then further promoted the event by contacting U.S. media about the event and directing them to speak with the coordinator. After the event, the IRA posted videos and photographs of the event to the IRA's social media accounts. The office identified dozens of U.S. rallies organized by the IRA. The earliest evidence of a rally was a Confederate rally in November 2015. The IRA continued to organize rallies even after the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The attendance at rallies varied. Some rallies appear to have drawn few, if any, participants, while others drew hundreds. The reach and success of these rallies was closely monitored through internal IRA documents that measured audience. For example, IRA documents from May 2016, reproduced in part below, show a graphic of the United States listing past and future rallies organized by the IRA, the size of the rally, and the names of any U.S. groups that had been recruited to assist or participate in the IRA-organized rally. The documents, referenced above, are redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. From June 2016 until the end of the presidential campaign, almost all of the U.S. rallies organized by the IRA focused on the U.S. election, often promoting the Trump campaign and opposing the Clinton campaign. Pro-Trump rallies included 3 in New York, a series of pro-Trump rallies in Florida in August 2016, and a series of pro-Trump rallies in October 2016 in Pennsylvania. The Florida rallies drew the attention of the Trump campaign, which posted about the Miami rally on candidate Trump's Facebook account, as discussed below. Many of the same IRA employees who oversaw the IRA's social media accounts also conducted the day-to-day recruiting for political rallies inside the United States. About 3 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique. 6. Targeting and recruitment of U.S. persons. As early as 2014, the IRA instructed its employees to target U.S. persons who could be used to advance its operational goals. Initially, recruitment focused on U.S. persons who could amplify the content posted by the IRA. For example, the IRA's manual contained an instruction on how to target influential U.S. persons. You should pay special attention to working with public opinion influencers. Concentrate your efforts on communicating with them. Attempt to establish a personal contact. Turn to them with a request to support, distribute a relevant topic. Do not pay attention to how it will be done. Even if the public opinion influencer simply shares your material, it will be an example of your success. Any platform will work for you, except for mass media. IRA employees frequently use the private messaging functions of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to contact and recruit U.S. persons who followed the group. The IRA recruited U.S. persons from across the political spectrum. For example, the IRA targeted the family of half a line redacted, citing personal privacy, and a number of Black social justice activists while posing as a grassroots group called Black Matters U.S. In February 2017, the persona Blackfist, purporting to want to teach African Americans to protect themselves when contacted by law enforcement, hired a self-defense instructor in New York to offer classes sponsored by Blackfist. The IRA also recruited moderators of conservative social media groups,
to promote IRA-generated content, as well as recruited individuals to perform political acts, such as walking around New York City dressed up as Santa Claus with a Trump mask. Beginning in March 2016, the IRA's budget, which was sent to Concord, began to include an entry for payments for activists. Many of the IRA payments to U.S. persons were made in connection with the U.S. rallies. For example, the IRA paid one Florida woman over $1,000 to attend 2 pro-Trump rallies in Florida and New York, while dressed up as Clinton in a prison jumpsuit. Similarly, the IRA paid an activist over $1,000 in connection with staging multiple Black social justice rallies in November 2016 and December 2016. The IRA paid for other expenses, such as buttons, signs, flyers, bullhorns, and other rally materials, as well as supplies to construct a prop prison cell at one event. IRA records show that, as the IRA's online audience became larger, the IRA tracked U.S. persons with whom they communicated and had successfully tasked, with tasks ranging from organizing rallies to taking pictures with certain political messages. For example, one recovered IRA spreadsheet, reprinted in part below, contained the names of over 100 U.S. persons recruited through Instagram. The spreadsheet contained comments about the IRA-controlled account through which they had been recruited, what they had been tasked to do, and their contact information. The documents referenced above are redacted, citing personal privacy and investigative technique.
7. Interactions and contacts with the Trump campaign. The investigation identified 2 different forms of connections between the IRA and members of the Trump campaign. The investigation identified no similar connections between the IRA and the Clinton campaign. First, on multiple occasions, members and surrogates of the Trump campaign promoted, typically by linking, retweeting, or similar methods of reposting pro-Trump or anti-Clinton content published by the IRA through IRA-controlled social media accounts. Additionally, in a few instances, IRA employees represented themselves as U.S. persons to communicate with members of the Trump campaign in an effort to seek assistance and coordination on IRA-organized political rallies inside the United States. A. Trump campaign promotion of IRA political materials. Among the U.S. leaders of public opinion, targeted by the IRA were various members and surrogates of the Trump campaign. In total, Trump campaign affiliates promoted dozens of tweets, posts, and other political content created by the IRA. Posts from the IRA-controlled Twitter account of @TEN_GOP were cited or retweeted by multiple Trump campaign officials and surrogates, including Donald J. Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Kellyanne Conway, Brad Parscale, and Michael T. Flynn. These posts included allegations of voter fraud as well as allegations that Secretary Clinton had mishandled classified information. A November 7, 2016 post from the IRA-controlled Twitter account @Pamela_Moore13 was retweeted by Donald J. Trump Jr. On September 19, 2017, President Trump's personal account @RealDonaldTrump responded to a tweet from the IRA-controlled account @10_GOP, the backup account of @TEN_GOP, which had already been deactivated by Twitter. The tweet read, "We love you, Mr. President." IRA employees monitored the reaction of the Trump campaign and later Trump administration officials to their tweets. For example, on August 23, 2016, the IRA-controlled persona Matt Skyber Facebook account sent a message to a U.S. Tea Party activist, writing that, "Mr. Trump posted about our event in Miami. This is great." The IRA employee included a screenshot of candidate Trump's Facebook account, which included a post about the August 20, 2016 political rallies organized by the IRA.
3 lines redacted, citing harm to ongoing matter and investigative technique.
B. Contact with Trump campaign officials in connection to rallies. Starting in June 2016, the IRA contacted different U.S. persons affiliated with the Trump campaign in an effort to coordinate pro-Trump IRA-organized rallies inside the United States. In all cases, the IRA contacted the campaign while claiming to be U.S. political activists working on behalf of a conservative grassroots organization. The IRA's contacts included requests for signs and other materials to use at rallies, as well as requests to promote the rallies and help coordinate logistics. While certain campaign volunteers agreed to provide the requested support, for example, agreeing to set aside a number of signs, the investigation has not identified evidence that any Trump campaign official understood the requests were coming from foreign nationals.
In sum, the investigation established that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election through the active measures social media campaign carried out by the IRA, an organization funded by Prigozhin and companies that he controlled. As explained further in Volume 1, Section VA, Infra, the office concluded, and a grand jury has alleged, that Prigozhin, his companies, and IRA employees violated U.S. law through these operations, principally by undermining through deceptive acts the work of federal agencies charged with regulating foreign influence in U.S. elections.
Thank you for listening to this episode. This show operates on the value for value model. I make the show available, commercial-free, and you decide what it's worth. You can return the value in any way you choose. One way is by going to MuellerReportAudio.com and clicking on the donate button, or supporting with a recurring monthly donation at patreon.com/TimberlaneMedia. For your donation and to show my appreciation, I will recognize your name and donation amount in an upcoming episode. Or you can remain anonymous by going to glow.fm/insider. You can also value these episodes by sharing the show and telling your friends. Or you can follow on Twitter @GovUnfiltered or at Facebook.com/GovernmentUnfiltered. Thank you for helping make public documents like this one accessible through audio.